Vice Admiral Anup Singh, PVSM, AVSM, NM. Vice Admiral Anup Singh is former Commanding in Chief, Eastern Naval Command. After 4 decades of service in the white uniform, Admiral Anup Singh superannuated from the Navy on 31st October 2011. His seagoing assignments included command of 4 warships and of India's Western Fleet, wherein he led Operation Sukoon, involving evacuation of non-combatants from war-torn Lebanon in July 2006. Assignments ashore included Assistant Controller of Warship Production and AMP Acquisition, CI Navy, DSSC, Deputy Chief of Naval Staff, Deputy Chief of Integrated Staff, and finally as the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Eastern Naval Command. His areas of research include the maritime economy, maritime security, and geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific. In 2018, he authored the Navy's history for the period 2001 to 2010, titled Blue Waters Ahoy. And Vice Admiral Anup Singh would be speaking on the very interesting topic, does India have blue water Navy ambitions? Over to you, sir. Please help me welcome Vice Admiral Anup Singh.
A lot has been discussed about CPEC, and I've been a firm believer even before the ink dried on that paper on a horse-driven buggy with Nawaz Sharif and Xi Jinping, that this is nothing different from what was going to happen at that time in Hambantota, was going to happen in the world's emptiest airport, where only an AN-224 had landed once as a demonstration from Ukraine, the largest military aircraft, which could carry some 200 plus tons, and was going to happen in some East African littorals. Not much of Djibouti as yet, because they've got their own, more than Djibouti, the Chinese have their own requirements in Djibouti. A very interesting point was made over here by Sushant as well as by Bharat. The moment I take your name, you're leaving the hall. Okay. I can't say get one for me. I've been waiting for one. Is about hidden costs in these loans. And when it comes to Chinese, we need to remember these soft loans that are touted as just 1 to 3%. You don't have to get an economist to tell you that in addition, there is something called LIBOR, the London International Banking Rate, which means conveniently and easily add 10%. Who's going to be able to pay up EMI or debt servicing in today's day and age? Certainly not nations who've got their debt to GDP ratio running beyond 100%. And therefore, the fact that the unsinkable aircraft in Sri Lanka was going to sink finally was well known to us, starting 2008. And it became nearly confirmed when Mahinda Rajapaksa was applauding, the flowers were flowing, the Chinese delegation was there, but the ship which was intending to commission the port of Hambantota could not navigate because there was a rock at less than 8 meters. So the ship drew about 10 meters. All this was known to us. I mean, it was the most stupid project. And a bigger, more stupid project was at world's emptiest airport. Okay, I'll wait for Bharat to come back before I take him on the aircraft carrier. I'm no great fan of what he opposed, etc. But let me now go to the subject that I have been assigned. I've been asked to to explain, does India have blue water ambitions? So to start with, first of all, we need to understand that India's principal maritime force, that is the Indian Navy, represents the nation's primary instrument of maritime power. There cannot be an argument about India's almost sealed land borders, unnegotiable terrain, and the lousiest of adversaries as neighbors. And therefore, this impressive figure of 15,000 kilometers of land borders, including 3 green-colored friends, green meaning not red lines, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, who are very friendly with us, also do not permit, because of an age-old rule of physics, do not permit too much of transaction of business or commerce. And traditionally, all cargo has been most economically transacted by the medium of over the seas. And therefore, even in the Sundarbans, what gets moved in and out from Bangladesh, more into Bangladesh than out, is only through the medium of the water. That's where the importance of the seas comes in, and that's where the importance of the navies comes in. Because 71% of Mother Earth, one has to keep reminding oneself, is composed of water. Only 29% is terra firma, but human being a creature that is only aware of the terrain on which he stands, lives, sleeps, and eats, is hardly aware of the importance of the seas, because 37 to 43% of the global GDP and nations' individual GDPs get transacted only over the seas, import and export. And that's survival even for Nepal, Bhutan, Afghanistan, etc. When we come to the meaning of a blue water navy, a lot of people say, what is the meaning of blue water navy? Are we a blue water navy? Are we heading to become a blue water navy? Or the Chinese have got a 355 ship navy today, far superseding the US Navy numbers. Numbers don't really matter. Technologies do matter, capabilities matter, but most importantly, it is sustenance at sea, the staying power at sea, which is of consequence in anything to do with the navy and maritime frontiers. What are my maritime frontiers? One has to understand that. Not the 12 nautical mile territorial sea, not the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, which adds up to 2.2 million square kilometers, almost 2/3 of our landmass. Not one of the richest peninsulas insofar as positive geographies are concerned. We are the second largest peninsula in the world, owned by only one country. The largest one, at 3 million square kilometers, is of the Arabian Peninsula, comprising of 10 countries, including one landlocked Jordan. And here we are. We possess the second largest peninsula in the world, with the land open to the sea, freely open to the sea on 3 sides. 212 ports, out of which 60 are operational insofar as overseas trade are concerned. Who's going to protect all this? This is the least of the responsibility of a navy. What is the most important responsibility of a navy? Is to be able to sustain itself for any task, be it surveillance, day-to-day monitoring over the Malacca Straits or the Persian Gulf, which sends out 40% of all the world's seaborne trade in oil and gas. And we, as you know, are dependent for more than 78% of our oil on imports, most of it coming from the Persian Gulf. Some we get from Angola, all the way from the west coast of Africa, because it is sweeter and cheaper. What does the Navy therefore have to do? It has to remain where it has been deployed now formally and officially in 7 spots in the Indian Ocean, starting from the Persian Gulf, called mission-based deployments in 2017. There used to be 1 ship. When the tanker wars reoccurred in 2017, we started putting 2 ships, not round the clock. We can't afford it. As Bharat rightly pointed out, can you afford to spare so many ships even for escort of carriers, etc., etc.? We haven't reached there. There is an important aside that I must point out over here. It is important because it is the actuals are still classified, very highly classified. After the 62 debacle, Pandit Nehru had tasked some eminent parliamentarians and called it the Emergency Committee of the Cabinet to find out, just like the Kargil Review Committee, what needs to be done to prevent an episode of this nature and prevent a disaster for the nation's security and the armed forces. How do we bring up the armed forces to a level where we can be self-sufficient rather than relying in our dreams on police forces only? And that committee submitted its report 1.5 years later. The only things that I can divulge over here, even though it was almost 15 years or 20 years ago that I saw the document and therefore won't remember much of it, but the things that stuck in my mind and are now repeated ad nauseum by the three services in their open presentations was that the army must have 800 boots on the ground. That we have far succeeded that number is, as is well known to you, is still insufficient because of our terrain, because of our neighbors, and because of internal security requirements. The Air Force must have 42 squadrons, and we are 10 shots at the moment. And I'm not going to talk about the flying coffins because I'm being videographed, so it should not hurt anybody outside this room. That's what we are relying on at the moment. And the Navy must have a 138 ship Navy. A ship can be a 10-ton tub. A ship can be a 40,000-ton aircraft carrier. But it had a lot of meaning in detail that we must be able to keep the seas around us secure and must be able to exercise what is called sea control in our primary areas of interest. So let me go a little deeper into what is the meaning of a blue water capable Navy. As I said, a Navy that is able to have reach, which means it should be able to go from point A to point B, but more importantly, have staying power. And that means endurance. So you need sea legs. And to get sea legs, the most successful navies which turned from green water, a recent nomenclature, to blue water are those which have sufficient logistic supply chains at sea on the move. Like the Army calls it a logistic train. So when is it, just rewind the clocks in your mind, that China really got its goats? And we were very happy, but today we and the Americans are extremely disappointed and worried. Why did it get its goats at that time? The year was 1990-91. Desert Shield was real shock and awe, which has not been reflected in the book for the Chinese. But Desert Storm, they said, my God, they got the shivers. How did the Americans do it? And where have we left ourselves behind? The reason? Mao, from the time the Soviet-Chinese relations were really good, used to think that it is a submarine which is an instrument of power projection in distant seas, unseen, stealthy. He wouldn't listen to his own experts, including a general from the army who was brought in, the only country in the world where a general was depended upon to improve the navy, and he did it. And he continued to wear the army uniform till about 3 years had passed. We haven't had that situation as yet, because we don't need one. And Liu Xiaoqing, the general, the good general, said, I will have to die with my eyelids open unless during my lifetime, even in retirement, the Chinese Navy, PLA Navy, gets an aircraft carrier. So he died in 2011, a year before the Liaoning was commissioned. And his eyelids were shut, poor chap. But he kept saying, look, you need destroyers, frigates, corvettes, and a balanced fleet. a phrase which was coined by the great Sergei Gorshkov in his famous book, Sea Power of the State. And he said, there's no point in having 2,000 vessels. You must have a balanced fleet. You must have aircraft carriers, you must have destroyers, you must have frigates, you must have corvettes, and you must have patrol boats. The Chinese Navy till 1990 was a brown water navy, ladies and gentlemen. Very few people are aware of it. Because they said, Mao feels that we have had a nuclear-powered submarine from the Soviets. We will reverse engineer it now that relations are becoming bad, but we must mass produce conventional and nuclear-powered submarines. Because they are the ones which will project power, unseen by the world. A submarine, irrespective of whether it is nuclear-powered or otherwise, is a sea denial weapon. It is surface ships which are the queen of the sea, which actually do the calling, which actually do seeing is believing for others, which actually make presence, flag showing, surveillance, monitoring, and everything else happen. Now, people also say that during the Cold War, the Soviets had places, but the Americans had places and bases. So that's the way to go for us. Hambantota is going to become a place, no matter how much of writing is done at the time of that great lease for 99 years for $1.12 billion, which means $11 million a year, which is less than chilla hua peanuts for the Sri Lankans. And they've been so stupid. They should have known when that Chinese company offered 85% finance for phase 1, $350 million, that they will not be able to pay up their EMIs. So it's that famous caricature, I forget, one swallow does not make a summer, of a fisherman trying to hold the neck of a pelican who's trying to swallow the fish that he had caught. That's what the Chinese have done, and they will continue to do, and CPEC will go the same way. Back to the blue water navy. A brown water navy is what Mao was encouraging. He famously said that land dominates the sea, so get coastal batteries and get submarines. Nothing else is required. So they only had chota-mota patrol boats. Some of them used to come under escort up to the Malacca Strait and even come into the Bay of Bengal, stay in Myanmar for a few months or weeks and go back. And in rough waters never used to sail. But they were meant to be only looking after patrolling the territorial waters, not even the EEZ. A brown water navy was famously known to be able to protect only up to 100 miles from shore. During the Cold War, who were the blue water capable navies? Only the US Navy and the Soviet Navy. And the Soviets did not have an aircraft carrier till the Kuznetsov came up, very late in the Cold War. And they were about to make the Varyag, which has become the Liaoning now, because she was being made in a Ukrainian port and a shipyard, Sevastopol. And the Soviets had a wonderful system. They had the largest merchant fleet under their flag, a principle of a communist country to rely on its own resources as a strategic reserve. 2,500 ships. The Chinese just crossed that figure recently. Any ship could be commanded by any warship of theirs. And they taught us in 1975, when I was navigating a ship. I was the junior most officer on a very small ship coming from Riga all the way to Mumbai, 8,000 miles. At 3 places, they told us, Soviet secrets are Soviet secrets. You will not open yourself to any country which is a member of NATO. The only country they agreed was France, because Charles de Gaulle at one stage, as you know, had threatened and moved out of NATO, and they trusted the French. And they said, you will not allow any French person to come on board, you can go ashore. And we fueled in each of these 5 ports, but everywhere else, in 3 places, it is a merchant ship which came, towed us with a rope, unconventional. Along the rope, they had bridled a 4-inch hose for transferring fuel, diesel to us. That's what the Russians did throughout for staying power. But the Americans did what they did in Desert Shield, expeditionary forces, and that's what the Chinese are now attempting to become. They are still quite a distance away. Where is India insofar as blue water capability is concerned? And why do we need a blue water navy? Rather than saying, does India have blue water ambitions? Of course. We have a requirement. That figure of 138 ships of the emergency committee of the cabinet was breached only once 4 years ago, only coincidentally. And we will not be able to breach it again for quite some time because of legacy platforms on which we are sailing, Soviet era platforms, Jugaad of Ludhiana style, sometimes very successful. The Trenton bought from the United States in hot transfer after she had done 31 years. And the way we refitted her and are sailing her till this day, steamship, antique. The Americans are totally amazed. And while we were taking over the ship, they had power failure on that ship for 96 hours with our crew on board as well. So we are great at Jugaad. But that's the only way when there are no budgetary support available. Now, when it comes to our responsibilities, do remember that Indian Ocean, despite being the smallest out of the three main oceans, has access and windows only through choke points. And you need presence. That's why I said 7 ships on mission-based deployments were positioned starting 2017. Cannot afford to position them 24/7. So we do slots. And in important areas, Central Indian Ocean, between Sri Lanka and Maldives, mouth of Malacca for obvious reasons, the dilemma, mouth of the Lombok, in the Persian Gulf, 2 ships at any time. And these presence missions, mission-based deployments and flag-showing missions, have such a fine positive effect on countries in Southeast Asia, on countries in Persian Gulf. India is there. It is not just China one has to worry about. You ask them. They won't openly say it in conferences, but you ask them. I mean, on their own, they keep coming and saying, why not more numbers? We haven't got them. So we need numbers, but more importantly, we need the logistic train. Otherwise, we are sunk. I think there is only one more issue that I want to touch about is the carrier, Bharat. Yes, most of what you said is right. The only thing is that it is not just for blue waters that you need carriers. In our case, we bought the first aircraft carrier, Vikrant, only for air defense of the fleet. Exactly what you said, that, just to put up some aircraft in order to do air defense and protect the fleet, you have a larger fleet around it, a larger flotilla to protect. So it's a vicious circle. Till we breach that 133 number in terms of capital ships, that means frigates and above, and submarines, you cannot really provide sufficient numbers. But at the same time, as time has passed, from just air defense of the fleet, carriers, as per our requirement, have moved on from being air defense of the fleet capable to capable of power projection, force projection. So it is not just the reach of a Harrier, which could have only 1.5 or 2 hours of endurance and carry only a Sea Eagle missile, not a MiG-29K, whose reliability, as you know, has been in question, and now it's in the papers. Therefore, I'm talking from the papers. But you cannot afford to buy the F-35C and B, firstly, because on the Gerald Ford, it hasn't proved itself. B, if you want to launch that aircraft with full payload, you need a catapult. On ski jump, he will go up only with about 60% payload. And C, it will cost you over $200 million a piece, as against $31 million that we paid for the MiG-29K. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. Are they all from Amity? Wow.
Sir, we are severely concerned about the intelligence issues that we are having with our Navy. the naval acquisition, we have made indigenous efforts, but I would say there have been some important information leakages, like Scorpion submarine, the intel was leaked, or the data link 2 that we made for the P-8I aircrafts. That intel is with Americans, and we certainly can't trust Americans to be all-weather friends. So how are we going to deal with this lax intelligence attitude that we have right now if we are to protect Navy before we go full blue water?
Okay, you started off this question in the last session as well. Insofar as the Scorpion leak is concerned, I don't think we need to worry about too much about it, because there are some bunch of papers running into maybe terabytes. They are no good to man or beast unless a guy knows the entire design, all the QRs that we put in as Indians, and the French gave for the Scorpion, and connected the dots. It's not all that easy. I mean, it was said that from Australia, somebody passed it on for money or otherwise to a Pakistani. It just doesn't matter. What really matters is signatures. And fortunately, that kind of a thing couldn't have been leaked because we had not even taken over the first one at that time. So why do the Chinese submarines keep coming over here? The first one came in 2014, docked in full view along with a support vessel, because it was not a nuclear-powered submarine, with a support vessel also to try out such a long passage into Colombo Harbour, rested for 2 days, and thereafter went on a picnic of the Indian Ocean underwater. What does it do in this picnic? Collect intelligence, go close to your harbours, see what kind of traffic of merchant ships is, and merchant ship signatures of their propulsion is entirely different from warships because of the kinds of propellers, whether it is gas turbines or steam turbines or diesels, and the kind of noises that propellers make. And then the guy comes up with a periscope to identify what kind of a ship it is, photographs, etc. If it is calm sea and daytime, and hides and says, this should go into my library under the name so-and-so ship or so-and-so Indian warship, etc.
Anybody else?
Chinese concerns and strategic concerns, vulnerabilities and the oceans.
That's right.
Right, sir?
That's right.
Now, what are the capabilities which the Navy would need to deter China's aggressive behavior along the LEC? Because that is the way the Chinese strategic concerns are.
Very good question, Vinod. The long answer shortened is capital outlay at least once for a 2-decade-old Andaman Nicobar command. Whether you need a parliamentary tinkering of Parliamentary Act, or you need to get everybody else, including the finance minister, on board to say, do or die. Galwan has happened 2 years ago. Put some capital allocation for that command. Don't leave it to the services, and don't give it to the Sincan alone. Do the planning here in Delhi with Sincan sitting and with your thinkers, not necessarily veterans and serving guys, but other thinkers, strategic thinkers. Get Bharat to make sure that there are some ballistic missiles without warheads, and do exactly what China does. The 3 Ds. What is it? I keep saying it in various conferences. Demonstrate, to deter, and dissuade. Who knows which missile carried what kind of a warhead and where all did it go, except its own Yuang 1-5, which is sitting in Hambantota. But we need that real unsinkable aircraft carrier and great strategic outpost in Andaman Nicobar Islands, for which after so many decades we finally positioned an Andaman Nicobar command. And what did we have? Landing craft utility. Hardly a gun on it. Another LCU brand new. Then the Navy positioned a brand new OPV with a 4060 modern gun. What are we doing? We need to create over there. We already have a dual-use airfield. We need to create 2 more dual-use airfields out of the airstrips that we've got, which are military purpose only. And they are both 3,000 meters. So you need to just up the infrastructure, put it dual use. Why do I say dual use? Not for your own citizens. But look at what the terrain and the outlook in that area of 572 islands. Leave the tribal reserves and forest reserves aside. Instead of 11 out of 572 islands, open up all those which will still be protected by Indian tourists under the watchful eye of security forces, etc., and civilian security forces. Do exactly what they do in Langkawi across 200 miles. Do exactly what they do in Indonesia, less than 80 nautical miles away. The terrain and the environment is exactly the same. And start flights between Port Blair or between Campbell Bay, if there is a dual-use airfield, towards these islands. Those tourists from Japan, Philippines, South Korea, America, Australia will come running to see what is Andaman Nicobar Islands. You make money there and utilize it but that never happens. We've got something called the Consolidated Fund of India. Even when a service does something, money doesn't come back to it for having spent the money. Money goes into that kitty. And this allocation has to be made. 22 years and we've gone nowhere. Then you will have eyes in the sky all the time over Lombok and Malacca Straits. And suddenly Hu Jintao will admit, yes, 2004 I did make the statement. At the moment the Chinese are denying it. The Malacca dilemma. And then you will have everybody doing exactly what the Americans did in early 2002. They came over here before they ran Operation Enduring Freedom or whatever and said, can you please escort high-value ships, merchant ships, naval auxiliaries and our submarines transiting the Malacca Strait. It was called Op Sagittarius. Just 2 ships of the Indian Navy did that on surface. Submarines were escorted. So showing your flag and pointing your guns and even with small arms. That's all that we could afford at that time. We did all this at the request of the Americans. You today have the capability of putting eyes in the sky from staging from Port Blair, putting ships, because seeing is believing, and putting submarines, which will raise periscope every now and then, or not even raise periscope, point out a Chinese ship coming and put it out in the press, exactly what they do in global times.
So we have the gentleman sending across. We'll be very short and quick, sir. Yeah?
Yes, General Sharma.
One is that as every submarine that goes Malacca have to come on the surface and they can't go submerged, one. And the second issue is, when do you reckon that the Chinese 20-ship fleet will be able to operate in Indian Ocean with a long-range maritime aircraft to support as also logistics sustenance? Which year will you think that would be there in the areas of southern Bay of Bengal and operating freely, sir?
I'll answer the second question first, Rakesh, because at times I feel guilty, but also happy that it didn't happen. I used to show a slide, which Tony would have seen a number of times in the staff college, where I said Liaoning has finally got commissioned in 2012. It is a matter of 8 years. Next year I said 7 years. By 2020, this guy will have his footprint going all over the Arabian Sea, if not the Bay of Bengal as well. It hasn't happened because they do not really have blue water capability as yet. Places in Hambantota, Colombo, Djibouti, Gwadar do not really matter as much as where you want, when you want. That is, the old nomenclature used to be tankers in the Navy. The British used to call them Royal Fleet Auxiliaries. The Americans still call them AO, auxiliary vessels. And it is those kinds of vessels which move along with carrier-looking expeditionary vessels with almost about 30 to 40 aircraft, including GR-8 Harriers, Chinooks, and so on, and which have an endurance range of almost 5,000 to 6,000 nautical miles. But they also carry a logistic support ship, which today is not a pure tanker, but it also has a workshop, and that's what we are trying to get now for almost 12 years. The files are moving up and down, but that's not much, seeing what happened to the AJT. It took about 20 years. Logistic support ships. Now we call them fleet support ships. It has a workshop, all QRs given by you, and we've given QRs dime a dozen times. First of all, diesel, aviation fuel, AVCAT for your fighters and helicopters. It'll have workshops, it'll have ammunition, totally secure. It'll have cold rooms for provisions, food, fresh water for those whose evaporators may not be working properly, those ships. And you can stay on for months and months and months. Of course, for operational turnaround and rest and recreation, you need to send your crews, your ships into some port or the other than Karachi. Perhaps a time will come when Karachi will itself invite us to say, come and secure us. You know what happened to PNS Zulfikar in 2014, nearly hijacked by Al-Qaeda in Arabian Peninsula. And that would have been a very sad day. Sir, your second question was, the first question was?
All submarines have to come
No,
with subsubmarines.
yes. Ever since UNCLOS, actually it was a customary law even before that, in order to keep safe. Ever since UNCLOS 82, there's something called innocent passage which applies to merchant ships coming through the territorial waters. And there's something called the transit regime, which is better than innocent passage even for merchant ships, which is through international straits and archipelagic straits. Indonesia handed over archipelagic straits of Malacca, Lombok, Ombai, Vetar and Sunda straits on a platter in 82. So there is a restriction imposed on submarines which belong to navies, that they, even if depth allows, firstly in Malacca there is no depth. You have to transit on surface in all international straits. So what do the Chinese do? And they have come only once as far as we know, after having stupidly declared in 2014, January. And they were not seen by us in the Malacca, despite their announcement. They obviously came submerged through the Sunda Strait, which is illegal. But who's asking whom? Where are the rules? In a rules-based order. Everyone, I mean, given a chance, we will also do the same.
So, I just want to make a statement, actually, no question. Alluding to what the Air Chief Marshal made a mention, I'm actually an optimist, a pragmatist. I really want to make this comment for the younger generation,
Yeah.
not for. So, a lot has been conceptualized, we all know it, strategized, and whatever we can prognosticate in perspective for the good of the joint services, planning, integration, and operations. A lot has been discussed with the previous, God bless his soul, with General Bipin Rawat. And Rakesh, of course, is very much cognizant. So what I'm trying to make a point, everything has been spoken about. The armed forces, not they were in deep slumber. We are all from it. And let me tell you, sir, I'm privy to some very fine, intellectual, forward-looking, and futuristic plans which have been submitted. But the prioritization and the budget has been the biggest sore point. Now, who's doing what and sleeping where, I will not comment on that. But I speak with shared optimism. I think we are right now started cruising ahead. It's not bad times. So everything is not, I should say that we are at the butt end of, ridicule, or we are facing, very, very bad times and hardships. I really don't think so. I think we are moving ahead in the correct direction. And even as far as strategic autonomy is concerned, strategic communications, I think India is doing a wonderful job. A little bit of glitch here and there is, of course, quite pardonable. Thank you.
Is that all? Okay, I just want to say something. Sandeep, you wanted to say something? He has a Sandeep.
Admiral Singh, hi.
He's
Sandeep
an
Pulithan.
old friend.
Just one question.
And being an active journalist, I don't want to deny him the opportunity.
Admiral Singh, a very interesting talk. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Two observations. The Indian Navy is the only major world navy without a nuclear-powered attack submarine. The number of conventional submarines that you have, operational conventional submarines, is the smallest number in the last 25 years. And since you mentioned Mao, I want to, this quick anecdote that came to mind, that what he said in the 1950s, that China will get a nuclear-powered attack submarine even if it takes 1,000 years. They got it with about 990 years to spare, I think, 980 years. Do you think the Navy's carrier obsession has killed the underwater arm?
Okay. I've always said this is, I don't know, I can't draw a very accurate analogy, but it is like saying that when you've got antique irons to iron your clothes which run on coal, you can save electricity bill by not buying a steam iron which runs on electricity. Because the two are just not comparable. They are not even apples and oranges. An attack submarine is supposed to be a weapon of sea denial under the water. And its greatest asset and its greatest characteristic and property is that it has long endurance, unseen. It hardly comes on periscope. It hardly has to do charging of batteries because it's got a nuclear-powered long endurance machine. An aircraft carrier is for power projection. The old aircraft carrier that we bought, Vikrant followed by Virat in the 60s and the 80s, were for air defense of the fleet. Today's carriers, they carry a mix of aircraft, not just fighters, including the Hawkeye 2C, which has been on offer to us. There's no secret from, I don't know, Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman. And they said that we will give you the E-2D. You will be the first country. But we kept on planning, thinking, talking, filing, and circulation, orbit. And the UAE got the first one, E-2D. Do you know what they said? Once again, no secret, because an article has come out on it. Because I was there in the discussion, being DCNS who looks after aviation procurements. And I said, an E-2D, you do buddy refueling in the air. You also have tankers coming from ashore. We guys are not going to be investing into all that to keep an E-2D in the air. He said, no. Because there are going to be no self-defense weapons also, and you just want eyes in the sky, and particularly EW. That's the greatest asset on the E-2D. And we'll put drop tanks. From 5 hours, they promised 8 hours endurance. Our problem was that the carrier which was being designed, which is just coming out now, had just 8 feet left between the island structure and this guy's wing while taking off. The angle deck was so tight. So till we get a catapult, a Cato bar carrier, that will not be there. But everything else, in lieu of that, we've got the Kamov 31, which is an AEW aircraft. 4 of them will go into this new carrier. In fact, 5. You've got the MiG-31 and hopefully something succeeding it, a much better thing succeeding it. And you've got not the Chinooks, and we don't require them, but we've got the happily MH-60R, which is the latest flying machine in rotary wing today. 2 of them have already arrived from the US. All these will go in as a cluster of fixed and rotary wing aircraft. So that means that you've got an aircraft carrier not for air defense. Only 2 aircraft at a time will be flying at 20 or 10,000 feet for eyes in the sky for air defense of the fleet of not just escorts, but far away. The other thing is that the reach of an aircraft carrier is not the gun or the missile, but it is the aircraft. That includes the reach of the AEW. So if you get a Rafale or even the MiG-21K actually gives you 2 hours time on task about 400 miles away if you don't carry full payload. That's a great change from the Harrier or the Seahawk of the 1971. Thank you. Is that all? Gaurav, can I see you somewhere? Gaurav, I just wanted to commend you for having worn the tie of the alma mater. If I am looking different, I am very sorry. But I must tell you, this carries a little more heft in my mind because this is Khadi from Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. And made by cottage industries, so there is no other nomenclature. Thank you very much. I just wanted to compliment you for one more thing, that each time I see you, I wonder, how is it that you don't age like the rest of us? Please tell us, how many spoons of Botox do you add to your beer?